Hello, good evening, everybody, or good morning, or good afternoon. So, welcome, everybody. So, I hope that everything is okay. I hope that the sound is okay. I mean, why is the image so big? Welcome, everybody. And hello, good to see you too. Good to see everybody. So, okay, see and hear me well. Good, thank you. So I don't even have to ask the question. And yeah, so I think, yes. So the chat is working. Everything should be working. And yeah, so I'm just waiting a few seconds to let everybody in. And then we can start for the second presentation about Renaissance frescoes. So today we're going to talk about Perugino and about Perugia. And I mean Perugia, or better, something in Perugia, the frescoes in Perugia, Perugino made. So yes, and so hello everybody, and so from all over the world. And yes, you know, this is also now live on YouTube. Of course, the chat and the names, I mean, can't be seen on YouTube, and so it will be available for 2 weeks on YouTube. So if you missed something, or if you missed one of the 4 presentations, or also I think the presentations about the Etruscan world, they are still on YouTube. I'm not really sure how long, but it's a few weeks. So if you missed some of that, or if you're interested, you're welcome to have a look at those as well. And so I think now that I can start. So officially starting the second presentation about Renaissance frescoes. So welcome everybody. Welcome on World Virtual Tour. So my name is Patrizia. I'm an archaeologist and art historian living in Umbria, so in central Italy, somewhere on a hill near the capital of Umbria, which is Perugia. I immediately say Perugia is really one of my favorite towns in Italy. Because there's so much to discover. There are so many surprises when you visit Perugia. I mean, everybody knows what to expect in Florence or in Venice, of course, but Perugia is always a surprise. So that is just taken, well, I'm just saying that like that. And so today is the second lesson about the Renaissance frescoes. So last week we talked about Piero della Francesca and his masterpiece in Arezzo, the famous Cappella Bacci with the legend of the True Cross. So if you missed that, it's still available on YouTube. So I posted the link on the chat. I can do it again just here in the beginning. And and so it will be available for a few weeks. Wait, like this. Oh, okay. And yes, and I'm also posting a link, and then I can, really start with the presentation. This is World Virtual Tours, and so this so it's only based on donations. So if at the end of this presentation you liked it and you want to leave something, you're very welcome to do so that we can, keep on going and creating these presentation or live walking tours. There's quite some work in these presentations. I mean, of course, I know what I want to talk about, but, putting just the slides together, finding good pictures, it's so difficult. So now I'm going to close the chat. I will reopen it, of course, at the end. To take your questions. So yeah, normally now the chat is closed, and I'm going to share my screen and really start with the presentation. Also the audio. Okay, so now we're good to go. So Yes, so this is the World Virtual Tour Free Academy. And so we are having a cycle of 4 lessons or 4 presentations about masterpieces of the Italian Renaissance. And of course, when you talk about masterpieces of the Italian Renaissance, you immediately think of the Sistine Chapel, you think of Raphael, also in the Vatican, for example. But I wanted to talk about something perhaps a little bit earlier, so really before the heydays of this Renaissance in 1500, I mean, a little bit later, even if what we're going to talk about today is situated around 1500 and a few years earlier. But I also wanted to talk about that. And because, when you go to the, when you go to the Sistine Chapel, for example, and you see these incredible, this incredible fresco by Michelangelo, you should also notice what is on the walls, for example, everything leading up, of course, to in the beginning of the 16th century is also very important. Michelangelo was, of course, an incredible genius, a kind of lone genius. But, he when he grew up, he saw some other works. And now, today we're going to talk about Il Collegio del Cambio in Perugia. So the Collegio del Cambio has a double meaning because it's a building, or better, it's a place. So it's a monument, you could say. And it's also the name of a guild, because what we're going to see now are frescoes of the main room of the Collegio del Cambio. And the Collegio del Cambio was the guild of the money changers in Perugia. It's a very ancient guild. It already existed in the 13th century. I always emphasize, when I do walking tours in medieval towns, so the 13th century is such an incredible century. Those are the heydays of the development of the towns, with a lot of novelties and political point of view, economical point of view. So the whole cities are going to change. The administration and then also the architecture will follow, because they need all these new buildings for all these new institutions, for example. And so in the 13th century, the rise of the middle class and upper middle class, and also going to take the power in the government of the cities. And so the Collegio del Cambio was the guild of the money changers. And so here we see, Nobile Collegio del Cambio, you see the name, so the Noble Collegio del Cambio. And then above you see the symbol, or you could say the coat of arms of this Collegio del Cambio, which is a money chest or a coffer, and on top of it, the griffin. The griffin is the symbol of the town of Perugia. And here you can see another symbol. So this is not from the Guild of the Money Changers, but this is from the Guild of the Merchants. Now you have to know the Guild of the Money Changers and the Guild of the Merchants in Perugia. I'm talking now specifically about the town of Perugia in central Italy. And so the Guild of the Merchants was the most important guild in Perugia. And, we always say there were the two most important guilds were those of the merchants and the money changers. And so, but at a certain point, the merchants are becoming a bit more important, you could say. And so this is just a picture of the room of the Guild of the Merchants. You see, completely covered in wood, the ceiling in wood. And of course, this presentation is not about this particular, room, but this is mainly 15th century, so the beginning of the 15th century. And then you can't really see it in detail, but it's all wood inlay work. It's not just the same color of wood. These are all different colors of wood. This is an incredible room that is open for visitors, so you can go and visit. And most of the time you can visit it together with the room of the Guild of the Money Changers, where we're going to talk about just in a second. But so I just wanted to show you this, because this room, completely covered with panels of wood of an incredible wealth and also aesthetic luxury, must have made an incredible impression also on the Guild of the Money Changers, of course. Now, there they were not rivals. I mean, they had completely different tasks. So it was not that they were rivals in some way, but perhaps they were a little bit jealous that, the other guild had such an incredible room. And so just to give an idea, so this is the symbol of the guild of the merchants. As you can see, it's a griffin, so a mighty, a strong griffin. A griffin is half a lion, half an eagle. So it's a fantastic animal, of course. And since more than 800 years, it's the symbol of the town of Perugia. So today, if you walk around in the town of Perugia, you will see this griffin everywhere. It's all over the place. So it's really the symbol of the town of Perugia, the most powerful animal of the land and of the sky together. And this one is standing on a kind of parcel. So this is the symbol of the money, of the merchants of Perugia. And this is the symbol. This, by the way, is from the same book. So beautifully illustrated book with the statutes of Perugia. And here you can see the griffin on the coffer. So this is a symbol of the Collegio del Cambio, the Guild of the Money Changers. And what was their task? So obviously the name says Cambio, cambiare, change. So money changers. Already in the 13th century, there was the need to change money because there were several towns, and then also abroad, who had their own mint. For example, Perugia had its own mint since the 13th century, and Florence too, for example. In Florence, they had the famous florin, and in Perugia, they had the scudi, and in other towns, they had the ducati. And so you could change the money, but that was not the only task. Now here, I couldn't find another picture because, for example, in the Collegio del Cambio today, if you visit, it's strictly forbidden to take pictures. I mean, really, you can't, you just have to put your cameras away. And this is not really from the Middle Ages, but this is a little box. And in this box, you have a little scale. And then you can see all these little square metal pieces. And every square of metal corresponds to the weight of a specific coin. And so the purpose of the money changers was also to control if the coins were real. I mean, if the alloy was real, because something could look like a golden florin, but perhaps, there was some other metal in it. So this was also a task. And so they had these little boxes. This is not, I just took a picture from the internet, but so this is not one from Perugia, but so they had these boxes with all these weights, and so people could come in and say, is this coin a real coin, or so that was also a task. But the most important task was another one, and here already you have a glimpse of this incredible room, which was the main and public room of the Guild of the Money Changers. So on the right hand side you can see a statue of Justice, of Lady Justice. It's a gilded terracotta statue of the end of the 15th century. 15th century. And so it's Justice. And just underneath, on the wooden bench, underneath the statue, that was the place for a judge. And that judge would make judgments not for burglars or for murderers, but specifically for breaches of contract regarding payments. So if a miller, for example, was not paid by the baker, they could come there, they could go there, and there was a judge who could then speak justice. So that was also a very important task, of course, of this guild of the money changers. And also this guild, so the senior members of this guild had the right to appoint 2 members in the town council. So the other guilds, they only had the right to appoint 1 member, but the Collegio del Cambio had 2 members. And also the other ones, so the Guild of the Merchants also, they were the only ones that had the right to appoint 2 members in the town council. So that's, of course, the proof that they were very important. Another task of the money changer was also to control the mint. And so to check upon everything that regarded money, making of coins, and so on. So that was also a very important task. So they were really involved with money. And we know that around the 1490s, because they still have incredible archives where they have the notes of the different meetings that took place to decide the decoration of their main hall. So in reality, oops, oh yes, I was too early. So in reality, you can see that the ceiling and the walls, they are painted. And then the lower register is made with wood panels. And so perhaps you can't really see it, but those are all benches. So you can really sit all around there on these wooden benches. And so around 1490, they had a meeting to say, okay, this room, we have to decorate it. Of course, I already showed you what the other guild had made. And so they said, okay, we have to do something. And so they decided first also wood paneling. And so the wood, afterwards I will show you a detail, is also wood inlay work of the highest quality. And then they also decided to have the ceiling and the walls painted. And so in 1496, we know there was a meeting that decided to ask Perugino. And here we have Perugino. This is a self-portrait, and this is the self-portrait he left also, he painted in the Collegio del Cambio. And so Perugino, his real name was, or his actual name was Piero di Cristoforo Vannucci. And as you can see, he died in 1523. So this year, 2023, is the 500th anniversary of his death. And so during the whole year, there were a lot of exhibitions still ongoing, a little bit everywhere, not only in Perugia, but everywhere in this region where where he was active. And so this is really the year of Perugino. And so his real name was Pietro Vannucci in reality. But when he was 20 years old, he went to Florence, and that's where they started to call him, the man from Perugia, Perugino. And in Florence, he arrived in the workshop of Andrea Verrocchio. So he was there at the same time as Leonardo da Vinci, in the same workshop, and Botticelli, for example, just to name the most important names, but there was also Ghirlandaio and so on. So big names all together that must have been really incredible. Now, in reality, he was born in Città della Pieve. So this is just a picture. Città della Pieve, also very charming little town. But I just wanted to point out the landscape. So the landscape are these typical hills. There is also it's nearby the lake, one of the largest lake of Italy, Lake Trasimeno, and that's important for his not for his style, but for his paintings and also for his colors. The use of his colors really remind of us, for example, even this simple picture. Look at the sky. You can see that, in the horizon, it's really white. And then if you go more up, it becomes more blue. Well, that is something that Perugino will consistently use in his paintings. And of course, so I told you when he was 20, he went to Florence, and he started really a big career there. And when he was in his early 30s, he was sent to Rome as the master of the Sistine Chapel. Now, of course, you have to forget about the ceiling. Michelangelo will paint the ceiling much later, 25 years later. But so we are in the 1480s, and so Perugino becomes the master of the decoration. So the coordinator. So he has to coordinate. So the Pope, Sixtus IV, who had this chapel built, Sistina, which was then named after him. So he appointed Perugino, and or better, it was also Lorenzo de' Medici who sent Perugino. That's a completely other question. But anyway, so Perugino was in the Sistine Chapel, and he could choose, and he asked, the painters, he asked Botticelli to come, he asked Luca Signorelli to come, and so on. And himself, so he also painted some of the scenes. And so this is, very famous, one of his most famous paintings. So this is Jesus who gives the keys of the kingdom of heaven to Peter, which is, of course, one of the crucial scenes of the whole chapel, because this is, of course, where Jesus, officially gives the legitimate power to Peter, who is considered to be the first pope. So this is, of course, very important for this chapel. But so by making this painting in this way, he creates a model. So when he painted this scene in this way, in those days, it was a big novelty. to tell a story like this. So in the front row, you have the important characters. And then in the background, you have these buildings, left and right, these triumphal arches, which of course are a direct reminder to the antique architecture. In the middle, you have the ideal building of the Renaissance, so a central architecture, perfectly symmetrical. And then in the background, you see this horizon. Here already, he's going to, to use the white in the middle and then the darker blue upwards to create this kind of infinity. Before Perugino, it was all, the skies were more like all plain blue. I mean, all the same color. So this, of course, creates a completely different idea of horizon and infinity. But it's this model of having also a big empty space in between the foreground and the background. So this is going to be used by many, many other painters. So he created really a model. So, and this is not the only model he created. So a model of representing something. So Perugino, he had an incredible career. So, he painted until his last breath, literally. And so especially in the first decades, he created a lot of new ways of representing things that will then be taken over and then perhaps perfected by other painters. I just wanted to put your attention to this kind of triumphal arch with the text. Now, the text is not really important because this is, of course, the glory of Pope Sixt. You see, Sixtus, who built the chapel, but it's the way he represents the text. So it's on this dark blue background with golden letters, because we're going to see this again. And so he, 20 years after, the Saint in the Sistine Chapel, he will paint also another very important, very famous of his paintings, and this is the wedding of the Holy Virgin and Joseph. And so again, you see the same kind of composition. So again, the foreground and this big empty space and an ideal building with a look through. So again, the sky with these colors. And here on the left, you can see the wedding. In the middle, you can see the painting of the Sistine Chapel. On the right-hand side, that's Raphael. Raphael, he also took over this model. And so here we have the two paintings next to each other. So on the right-hand side, you can see the painting by Perugino, the wedding of the Holy Virgin. And on the left, that is Raphael, also the wedding of the Holy Virgin. And so Raphael, when he painted this, he was 21 years old. And Perugino was, of course, very, very mature painter. But so we know Raphael, he spent quite some time in Perugia. Raphael, the young Raphael, he arrived in Perugia when he was 11 years old. I mean, that's a fact. We don't know if he came earlier, but when he's 11 years old, he's in Perugia. That's a fact. And then we find him in Perugia over and over again. So it's not that he stayed there always. So he also traveled. I mean, that's perhaps something, I mean, I don't have to mention that it's not about Raphael today, but, he was perhaps not the main pupil, but I mean, he had a lot of influence from Perugino. So that is also a fact. You can't deny that. The early Raphael, sometimes you can't really tell if it's Raphael or Perugino. So and I'm telling you that because we're going to come back to that for our Collegio del Cambio. And so Raphael, he painted several works in Perugia, but the only one that is still left is this. It's the upper part of a fresco in a very bad state. But so you can see Jesus Christ in heaven with some Benedictine saints around him. So the upper part, that is Raphael. So that's the only Raphael that we still have in Perugia. He never finished it. He started to paint, this is a fresco in a chapel. So he started to paint from the top and then he went down, but then he left and he never came back because he died in Rome. And so in the lower part, you can see these 6 saints, so on the 3 on the left and 3 on the right. And so that was finished by Perugino, the very old Perugino. 1 year after Raphael died, he, since, I mean, they knew he will never come back to finish it. So it's Perugino who then, finished this painting, with these 3 saints on the left and on the right. So I just wanted to mention this. And now we're going to Umbria. I mean, we're already in Umbria, but so this is Italy. And here we are in the heart of Italy, in the region of Umbria. And the capital of Umbria is Perugia. And so the Collegio del Cambio is located on the ground floor of this building that you can see behind the fountain. So this is a view on the main square of Perugia. The main square of Perugia is really fantastic. It's really incredible. You can see this incredible fountain, but it's not the theme of I mean, I could do a whole presentation only about the fountain because it's so interesting. But so on the background, you can see the Palazzo dei Priori. Also, I could say a lot about this because, well, but so I will show you from another angle. So you can see this is a huge building. I mean, when you see the main square of Perugia, you immediately understand this was not a small village. So this building, which they started at the end of the 13th century, so the heydays of the town of Perugia, and so they had to extend it several times. So in the end, the town hall, so this municipality building of Perugia, became four times larger than originally planned. So this really shows how, you know, this incredible development of the town of Perugia. And then you see on the ground floor, you can see all these arches, and today they are all shops, mainly shops. But there were already shops back in the Middle Ages. You know, there was no real, I mean, municipal activity on the ground floor. And here we can see the facade. So this is still part of the town hall, but as I said, on the ground floor then was rented to shops, for example, or for also the Collegio della Mercanzia. So the merchants, they also had their rooms there on the ground floor, a little bit, you know, down the road. And so this one is the Nobile Collegio del Cambio. In reality, there are 3 doors, but I couldn't find a picture. So today when you visit, you have to enter the door that is open. That wasn't a public room back in the days. So that was the room where the guild would have its own meeting, so the private meetings. But the other door, you can see with this beautiful arch and this beautiful bigger door, so that is the public room. And that's the room we're going to talk about. And so that is the Collegio del Cambio. So when we say Collegio del Cambio today, is the word for the Guild of the Money Changers, but also for the 3 rooms that are still today, you know, called the Collegio del Cambio. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other rooms, but so the main room, so this was a public room where they could come in and where the people could come in, where there were the judgments, where they could discuss, where they could ask advice, where they could change the money. So this was the public room. And so, as I said, 1490, they start decoration with the panels on the wall. So these are really benches. And in the middle is a kind of pulpit. And very high quality wood inlay work. And this is the entrance door, but then seen from the inside. So now here you can see the door is closed. And the top part, you can see it's also wood inlay work. So this, you know, the quality is not excellent. But here you can see it's a kind of architectural motive, perhaps an ideal city. You know, we are at the end of the 15th century. Throughout the 15th century, architects and so on, they were always very interested, or painters and sculptors, you know, to represent ideal cities. So, you know, that's probably the dream of every architect or painter. So to create the ideal city themselves. So with the ideal perspective, as you can see. We don't know if Perugino designed this particular, we don't know. There's no trace of it. And yes, then we come back to the room. So you can see this, let me see. So yeah, there are several walls and the ceiling that are painted, but let me immediately start. So normally you, so when they painted, they started from the ceiling. And so that's also the case here. We have in the archive, so we know in 1496, the guild asked Perugino to come and paint. And also the first contract was signed in 1496, where Perugino, you know, accepts the task to paint this room. And in the contract already, you know, they give certain indications. So they say, okay, in the ceiling, we need to have this kind of theme. And then on that wall, on that particular wall, we need this. And we need to paint him the characters that we will tell him. So perhaps there are no names of the characters, but, and then on that wall, we need this. So there are already specifications. And so in this in the Collegio del Cambio, there is one date. So Perugino painted the date 1500. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture of this, so he said 1500. And so, you know, normally you would think, okay, then he finished by the year 1500. So if he started in 1496, or, you know, when he signed the contract, then it's not that the day after he starts to paint. You know, he first has to make a preparation. He has to do measurements and so on. And this is very interesting because we have a lot of documentations. In 1496, we know that in those days he lived in Florence. You know, he lived in Florence. He has his house in Florence. He's married in Florence. He has his workshop in Florence. Very, very active workshop. He had a lot of commissions everywhere in Italy. But so we know that in 1496, he appoints somebody to take care of his businesses in Florence. So that means that he knows that he's going to be away for a certain time. And also in 1496, we know that his how do you say, his basic assistants that he always used in Perugia, so his collaborators, that they bought a kind of ground floor of a house, and that they started to do a lot of work. You know, they knocked down walls because they needed a large space. It's not specified why they used this space, but it must have been, you know, to start and prepare, you know, for this big job, you know, very big job. And also they needed a lot of space because they had to prepare the sketches and the real life size cartoons. And so yeah, so we have a lot of documentation about that. We don't know exactly the day when he started, but we know the payments. So also in the contract, they say, okay, we give you a little bit, you know, beforehand. And then after completion of every segment, we pay you. And then after so many months, we pay you. And so the thing is that the last payment was done only in 1507. So that's a bit of a mystery. Why was he paid in 1507? But that's perhaps a detail that, that's perhaps too detailed. Now here we have the ceiling. On the ceiling we have 7, so representation of 7 gods, and these are planet gods. So in the middle we have Apollo. Afterwards I'll show you some details, but we have Apollo, who is always referred to as, I mean, he's always put into connection with the sun. There is also the moon, there is Venus, there is Saturn, there's Jupiter, there is Mars, there is Mercury. So we have the 7 planet gods on the ceiling. And then on the walls, we have different themes. So the first thing we notice when you enter is this gentleman. This, you see, the names are always written underneath. This is Cato, Marcus Porcius Cato. Now there are several Catos, so in the history. So this in reality was a great-grandfather of the more famous Marcus Porcius Cato, that was living in the times of Julius Caesar. This one is so the great-grandfather. And why is he represented there? Well, because he is presented here in association with the words that are written down below, you see, under his feet. And now I'm translating this with my own words, because if you read the official translations or the literal translations, it's a bit. So in reality, look, he's looking to someone, and if you would be there and you would follow his gaze, he looks directly to the seat of the judge. So the judge who was sitting there saying judgment, well, you know, he had to do it under the gaze of this man. And this man is saying, who has to talk publicly or has to give judgment cannot be led by personal feelings of love and hate. You know, he has to remain on the right track, you could say. So he has to be just. So that is what he's saying. So Cato, I mean, also his so the great-grandfather and the other one, because there's a bit of discussion which of the two it is, but I don't want to go into that. But they both were, of course, exemplary. You know, they were examples of just men who preferred, you know, to live in solitude or to live in exile than to, than to agree with something they didn't really agree with. So that is, of course, an example for the judge. Now, of course, in reality, the Roman Cato probably wouldn't have worn this type of also this type of helmet, but we're going to also just to see some details. And then we have one big wall also facing the judge, where we have two parts, so left and right. And you see, we always have the lower register, we have 6 men. And then above these men, we have the 4, so 2 and 2 virtues, the cardinal virtues. And so let's have a look at the left part. So here we have 6 men, and these 6 men, they are divided into groups of 3. And these are wise men or ruling men, governing men from the classical antiquity. So there are always 2 Romans with a Greek in the middle. And so their names are written underneath. And then above them, you can see the virtues. So here we have the 3 first ones. So I can't talk too much about all single of them, but to give you an example, the one on the right-hand side with this crown, that is Numa Pompilius. And Numa Pompilius is considered to be the 2nd king of Rome. It's not really clear if he was legendary or not, but he ruled for 40 years in peace, and he also laid the basis of the Roman, how do you say, Roman right? No, the Roman, can't find the word, justice. And so all these men are, of course, examples. So you have Socrates also in the middle, and above them you have the cardinal virtue of prudence. You see this lady, she is holding this kind of scepter, but there are, do I have a detail? No. There are like 4 glass objects inside. So that means she has to be very careful, prudence. And then you can see the text, which is written in the same color with, the same style as the text we saw on the triumphal arch of the Sistine Chapel. And so prudence, what is she saying? So you see that this text is held by these 2 little putti, kind of angels. And so they say, what, O goddess, have you in store for mankind? Tell us. And Prudence answers, I trust that you will not do anything that you might regret. I teach you to seek the truth and its hidden causes, and nothing can be accomplished through me but what is just. So these are messages, of course, messages. So here we have 3 examples from the classical world, and above we have a Christian virtue. And that was the magnificent thing during the heydays of the Renaissance around 1500, so that they could put classical antiquity in relationship with Christian values, with Christian morale. And so that was only possible during quite a short time, because, in the Middle Ages it was not really possible. And later on, of course, then it was not possible again. But so that is very, very interesting. And then you have to know that above the cardinal virtues, you have the ceiling with the gods, with the planet gods. Because in the end, everything what happens here down with mankind, of course, is subordinate to what happens, or to the cosmic, cosmic forces. And so I'm going to talk about that also, I hope. Yes, this will probably last 3 hours. Oh my goodness, time is also always fleeing away. And then we have the other 3. So here we have the virtue of justice, and underneath we have again 3 personalities. On the right-hand side, we have the Emperor Trajan. So Trajanus. And Trajan, especially already in the Middle Ages, he was considered to be an example of a just ruler, of a just governor. For example, Dante Alighieri, the famous Dante Alighieri, in 1300, he puts him in heaven. So in his Divina Commedia, he goes to hell and to purgatory, and in heaven he meets the emperor. What does the emperor do in a heaven? Well, he is in so Dante Alighieri tells us that in heaven you have have these different circles. And so in the second circle, that is the place for the people who behaved according to Christian values, but did not have the opportunity to be baptized, or because they lived somewhere else. So Trajan in those days was considered to be an example. And above, Justitia. And what does Justitia say? I have the translation here as well. She says, if the just gods had created all men like these three, there would be no evil in the world. Worshipping me, the people advanced in peace as in war, but how great was their downfall without me. So that is the message of Justitia. And well, about the style, you see that if we go back here, you see the background and the landscapes are not really very well elaborated. In this case, of course, the landscape is also not really important. It's more like an anonymous landscape, but we can see the typical things of Perugino. For example, this olive green grass and the olive green landscape. That is a typical color of Perugino. And now, excuse me, but the pigments he used, nowadays they're doing a lot of analysis, and that is all ongoing. So now more and more we see that it's not that they only used one pigment. Often for one color, they mixed up several pigments. So we know that Perugino, for a certain blue, he mixed 5 different pigments. So that is something that was not really known until not so long ago. And so it's still ongoing because they haven't done that type of chemical analysis on a lot of places. So, but what he could do incredibly well was the representation of these textiles. You see the coats they have. And first of all, you have these incredible combinations, the red and the green, and then the yellow and the blue, and then this greenish and this pinkish. But when you're actually there and you look, for example, at the yellow, or you look at the green, and then if you can also do it here now with this screen. Let me see if perhaps add a picture quality. But for example, if you look at the one on the left with this kind of green coat, if you continue to look, it will turn into yellow. And if you are there on the spot, you actually start to doubt what colors these are. Because what he did was, so he would have a basic color, and then afterwards, often dry paint, he would then, continue to color, and I have a detail of that. Now, this whole program, so these men from the ancient world, from the classical world, and the virtues and the planets. So this is a program that was not invented by Perugino, and also not by the Collegio del Cambio. This was a specific commission, you could say, and we don't have a contract for that, and we don't have real proof, but everybody agrees that it must have been Francesco Maturanzio. Francesco Maturanzio was from Perugia, but he had traveled to Greece, he knew Greek, and he had studied a lot of Greek, and he had written a lot of comments also about ancient, also about, here you can see him with several books, Cicero and so on. And so he knew a lot about the classical literature and philosophy. And so we know his name is in context with some other commissions that are very similar. So everybody bets on Francesco Maturanzio, so that he had to make this whole concept that then was executed by Perugino. And then, so on that wall with these men from the classical antiquity, in the middle, on the kind of pillar, but it's trompe-l'œil, so the wall is completely flat, we have the self-portrait by Perugino. And self-portrait, it's like as if he put a painting, if he hung it there. And so these red are coral beads. Coral beads are to ward off the evil eye, il malocchio. And then underneath we have the famous text. So we can also see him represented with a red cap. The red cap was a privilege, of course. He, when he was in Perugia, he was appointed honorary member of the town council. So this is also how he represented himself. And so there you can see the text. Petrus Perusinus, excellent painter. And then, of course, these typical words of those days. If the art of painting had been lost, he would have given it back. And if it hadn't been invented, he would have done. So, well, he didn't invent the painting, but, you know, these are these high-flying words. Now, this is another portrait of Perugino, and it's only, you know, you could say very recently, I would say this year, it's only since this year that this painting is attributed to Perugino himself. It had always been attributed to Raphael. So we speak of attribution when there is no actual signature. So this painting doesn't have a signature, so it must be an attribution. And so it had been attributed to several painters, even to Raffaello. That was the latest. This is from the Uffizi. But since this year, it's officially attributed to Perugino. And this discovery was made this year when this painting from the Uffizi Gallery was brought to Perugia for the big exhibition. So in March, there was a big exhibition of Perugino in Perugia for the 500th anniversary. And it's during the study here and a study in the Collegio del Cambio that they could prove that both portraits, so yeah, sorry, I couldn't make it completely matching, but these two portraits were made with the same carton. So with the same sketch. So they and they could do it because, of course, since 2020 was the year of Raphael. It was the 500th anniversary of the death of Raphael, and this year is the anniversary of that of Perugino. And so since some time, all the works of Perugino and Raphael in Umbria, they are being analyzed with some very sophisticated, I mean, I don't know the details, but some very yeah. So everywhere since last year and this year, everywhere, they closed for some time because they had to, they put some scaffolding, and then I don't know, they even had acoustical equipment. I'm not really sure. And then, but the result is that we have some very nice pictures, because there are not a lot of good pictures. This is, by the way, Apollo on the ceiling. And so you see they were doing all this kind of analysis. And so from the analysis, they could tell that the self-portrait in the Collegio del Cambio was made with the same carton as the painting of the Uffizi. So the result of that was that for the exhibition, they had to reprint the catalog. Can you imagine? This was a major exhibition in Italy. It was really a major exhibition. And so the catalog was ready, but they had to reprint it because this discovery was made. And so it was available only since September, October. I mean, when the exhibition was already long finished. Okay, now it's not the first time they are doing analysis or now this was just an analysis, and also this analysis they still haven't published the results, because they have to study first all the works all over Umbria. But so these are pictures of an older restoration from the I think it was in the end of the 1980s or beginning of 1990. And so here also they made, with a photograph. And here you can see different techniques that the painters used. So these are frescoes. So they painted on the fresh plaster. And of course, they first made sketches. But they also had other help. For example, here on the left-hand one, the upper one, you can see clearly the traces of incisions. So they really put a ruler, and then they made a line in the fresh plaster to help, of course, to make straight lines. And then on the right hand side, you can see this line, this vertical line, in reality is the trace. So I mean, with the naked eye you can't see it. This is because they made it with a special kind of photography. But so that line in reality is the trace of a little string. When they wanted to make also vertical lines, when the plaster was fresh, they would put a string, they would tend a string, from the top to the bottom, and then they would pull it back and then, release it. So the string would make an imprint on the fresh plaster. So that was also a way to help. And then on the left in the bottom, you can see clearly the edges of 2 different giornata. So you know that they didn't paint these frescoes all in one go. They also always painted bits. And so these are the limits of 2 bits. And so, and this is quite rough, because normally they would do a better job, but there's a clear difference in the quality of the techniques, in certain areas, but that would perhaps take us too long. And what they also could see with the photography, for example, on the left, you can see this hand. And if you look very closely, as I do now, you can see these dots on the outlines of the fingers. So these dots were, of course, the dots that were put in from the sketch. So that is also something you can see. And here in the middle, here you can see how he could obtain these kind of almost fluorescent textile. So you see the base of this textile is very dark, and then he put with a yellow brush strokes, he would make it seem like as if it's fluorescent or shining. And this is a picture that they then made with this, when they made the last kind of analysis. So here we have high quality pictures. Here you can see almost every single hair. Look at, so all kinds of shades of white and gray and brownish. So here you can see, of course, the incredible quality of Perugino. And then if you would compare it to perhaps some other details of other parts of the paintings, then you could see that there's perhaps a different in quality, because he didn't do everything himself. Of course, he was the master of the whole project. He made the sketches and so on. But of course, his assistants would, they would paint certain parts, of course. And then we have, on the right-hand side of the wall, we have these 6 other personalities of antiquity, always 2 Romans with a Greek in the middle, and then 2 cardinal virtues. And here we have more military heroes. So here is a detail. So on the left, for example, these 3 gentlemen. So the one on the right, that is Horatius Cocles. That was a Roman soldier who sacrificed himself to defend his father and to defend Rome. So, they said that the Etruscans, they were attacking Rome, and there was only one bridge over the Tiber. And so Horatius Cocles, he put himself, he stood on the middle of the bridge, and then he said to his soldiers, you can destroy the bridge behind me. And so he sacrificed himself, so an example, of course, and he is represented underneath the cardinal virtue of fortitudo, so of the strength, force. And she says, let these 3 men serve as great examples of how all things are conquered and overcome with my arms. As a defender of the fatherland and of my dear ones, I am afraid of nothing. And though others are terrified of death, I welcome it. So you see, these are all examples, of course. But here we can see also a clear connection with the god, the planet god, that is represented above this scene. Because above this scene of the 6 more military heroes, we have the god Mars. And so the god Mars. So on the ceiling, we have these planet gods. And so it's under their influence, of course, that certain things will happen. So let me see, here on the right-hand side, we have these other 3. And here, again, you see the one on the right-hand side, he has a coat. It's yellow and pink at the same time. And if you're standing there, it's really remarkable. It's really remarkable how he did that. That's really unique. And they are standing underneath the temperancia, so the temperance or measure. And so again, she says, I rule over morals and moderate the passions of the soul. And if I wish, I make other men like these here. Follow me, and I will teach you how to improve yourself. So again, these and they're also under the god Mars. So I showed you the god Mars. So it's not unusual to represent these gods on these kind of chariots. So for example, on the right-hand side, you can see the moon, Luna, That's also from the Collegio del Cambio, but the other ones are from ancient Roman cameos, for example. Now, the one on the top left, that is another representation of Luna from Folignius in the 15th century. But just to tell you, it was not unusual to represent these gods on these kind of chariots. And here in the wheels, perhaps you saw it also in the God Mars, in the wheels of the chariots, you have the zodiac signs. And now there are books and books written on the combination of the zodiac signs, why Mars is represented with these zodiac signs and so on. It's very interesting, but I'm not an expert in that. But look, if you look at the ceiling, so in the middle you have Apollo, the sun, inspiration of everything, of course. And then, as I said, you have the god Mars above the military. Unfortunately, this is a picture of a book, because I couldn't find anything like this, ready on the internet. But this is from a book by Steffi Röttgen about frescoes. I mean, it's in 2 volumes. Afterwards, I can show it to you, because it's next to me. These are my most precious books, really. But so here you can see that the ceiling, is divided into segments, and those segments that correspond to the architecture below. And you see, for example, here at the upper part, you can see these two arches, you could say, and also below. And then you have these 2 triangles of the ceiling that correspond to them. So the ceiling corresponds to the architectural parts of the walls. And here we can say, so it's in the middle of the 15th century that, I mean, the ancient gods, I mean, people were always interested by them, but in the middle of the 15th century, we are in the early Renaissance. They're very interested in everything that is antiquity, also the astronomy, for example. And it's in the middle of the 15th century, that there is a load of new books that come to Italy directly from Constantinople. So before the fall of Constantinople in 1453, there were a lot of refugees, and so Greek refugees, you could say. I mean, they arrived with copies of these ancient literature. So there's a whole load of new literature that arrives. So very interesting. And so Baccio Baldini, he was a printer. No printer. I mean, he made prints. Let's put it this way. And so the originals are now in the British Museum. So these are, these are pictures from the website of the British Museum. But so here you can see the same kind of thing, this illustration. So you see these gods riding on top of the world. And so it's under their influence that there's a lot happening. For example, on the left, that is the god Mars. And you see what is happening below. So the god Mars, under his influence, there are wars and there's a lot of battle, for example. And on the right hand side, that is Venus. So under Venus, there's a whole different atmosphere. So and then also zodiac signs in the wheels. So this is a kind of calendar, an almanacco, really, printed in 1465. So before the Collegio del Cambio. But so, the Collegio del Cambio is not the only example where you have this kind of, that's what they were interested in. The ideal of the Renaissance man would be to have these antique ideals and the antique science, you could say, fused with religious sentiments. So that was a kind of ideal to have them together. And this is Saturn. So Saturn, here you can see in this old almanac, Saturn is related to agriculture. So Saturn is really, you could say, good for agriculture. Why? Well, then of course you have to go to the whole Roman religion, but can't go into that. But so just to tell you, it's really interesting how that is related. And then, yes, here we have also some very nice detailed pictures, recent pictures. So the headgear, that is Perugino. He was not the only one, but he, we always say if Perugino hadn't been a painter, he would have been a hat maker or would have been a hairdresser, because I mean, he must have seen this type of head hats or headgear of, I don't know exactly how you call it. I mean, I don't know, to go to war with something like that. So of course it's very decorative, but that is typical of those days. Yeah, so I could show you many pictures of all these very strange hats painted by Perugino. We know that he used his own wife as a model for all the hair dressing also. And here you can see, so on the right hand side, you can see a character of the Collegio del Cambio, and you can see on the left, these are other examples painted by Perugino. So he was repeating himself in the sense that he would often use the same cartons also for his. So if you have already something ready, why not use it, of course. And then we have the back wall. There we have a religious scene. So here on the left we have, excuse me, it's that season again. But so on the left we have the Transfiguration on Mount Tabor. So that is where Christ appears in this kind of white that is not an earthly white. And then beneath you have three apostles, and he appears to them. And again, the background is not really, in this case, it's not really important, and the background is not really elaborate. And here we have a lot of discussions about some of the characters, because we are now talking about this time frame. So we know 1496, Perugino accepted the commission, but probably it's not that the next day he would start to paint. So we know that in 1498 there was a first payment. So by then he had started probably, and in 1500 there are also some payments. So we really know that in 1498 and 1500, so he was there. The last payment was in 1507, so we don't know, didn't he finish everything, or were they late, or we don't really know, or was there a penalty? I mean, we don't really know. But is it possible that in the time frame that Perugino was painting in the Collegio del Cambio, this was a big job. I mean, this was not just, a panel, this was a whole room. This was a big job with different people involved. So I mean, this was not just something. The people in Perugia, they must have tried to peep and have a look, what was inside. So is it possible that the young Raphael, who we know was there, at least for at certain moments he was there, is it possible that he never went in there and that he never took a paintbrush? So that is the big speculation. And this is ongoing since a long time. There is no proof, no document at all that says that Raphael was in any way involved in this. But since a long time, everybody said, okay, perhaps this, the young St. John on the left could be perhaps Raphael, or the Jesus Christ on the right could be Raphael, or they're looking in all kinds, this could be Raphael perhaps. So everybody is dying to wish or dying to see Raphael somewhere, because of course if you can put the Raphael on the door, Perugino and Raphael. So yeah, I mean, it must have been a very young Raphael. It's true, but then they say, oh, but if the last payment was in 1507, it means that perhaps in 1507, Raphael, 1507 he left. That's when he left, definitively Perugia. But so could it be, that Raphael, perhaps then he repainted something, or so you see, there's a whole speculation going on. And this last analysis, so these last works I showed you, and that they did it now in March. This was in March now of this year, and so the results are not published, but well, they talk about perhaps some revelations that they can prove some involvement, perhaps. I mean, it's all perhaps, and that is thanks to the brushstroke. So that's why they are doing this whole thing. So they did the same thing in the chapel I showed you, where we know the upper part was painted by Raphael. So if they can prove that it was exactly the same brushstroke, because we know every painter had its kind of signature brushstroke, it had a certain way to paint, and but it's still ongoing, so it hasn't been published. We don't know when. They're still still doing analysis in certain parts. And then we have the nativity. The nativity, so the nativity, and this is the only scene. Now, this is a picture, of course, you see, this is another color because it's another contrast. So, well, but here you can see it clearer. So this is the only one where you have a more elaborate background. How come? Well, because he had this ready. If you look at all the works of Perugino, there are several and several nativities. So, and look at, for example, these shepherds with these sticks and the one with the bagpipe. So here you can see, this is another one. This is another nativity. This is the one in Montefalco. But you see, this is the same kind of composition. So here he had it ready. He had the persons ready, he had the cartons ready. So it's clear, you know, that this is the same carton and the same. So here he had it ready. So, you know, he could paint some background. He had more time, probably. So there are many nativities of Perugino around. And then there's a third religious scenes. These are prophets and sibyls. So you see on the left-hand side, you have some prophets, for example, Solomon, Jesaja, and on the right-hand side, you have sibyls. Sibyls are female prophets. And God on top with angels. So here we have, so this particular God with these seraphims, so these angels with the 6 wings, only their heads, and then these other 2 angels, we call them the skating angels because it is if they are ice skating or skating. And so this is also something that he has used over and over again. So the same card and the same sketch that he used. And here we have the sibyls, again, with some very nice hairdresses. And again, look at the colors of the textile. Let's see, with these like fluorescing colors and very elaborate headgear. And here, every time we see a nice young portrait, young man, they say, oh, this must be Raphael. This must be a portrait of Raphael. You know, that Perugino painted the young Raphael. Well, who knows? But I mean, Raphael, every time there's a young man, it's supposed to be Raphael. And here I just wanted to show you the skating angel. So on the left-hand side, that is a Raphael. In reality, that is a Raphael. When he was very young, he made this. So, well, anyway, then we have the Statue of Justice, and on top we have Venus. Yeah, because I see him way over time. And this is just to end, to honor Perugino. Perugino, he died in a little village in Fontignano while he was painting in this little church. And the original painting by Perugino that he painted there is now in the National Gallery. It's in England, but there is his tomb. You see the tomb of Petrus Perugino's picture. So, there's a lot more to tell, but so I'm going to end it here and then take your questions. So if you liked it, you can always leave a donation here. I will also put the link in the chat. And next week, of course, then we will be in Orvieto. We will talk about the frescoes of Luca Signorelli, something completely different. At the same time, so they painted this 1500 at the same time, but completely different. That is okay. So I will here close, and then I will open the chat. And okay, where is it here? Okay, and so yeah, I hope you had a little impression of the Collegio del Cambio. Definitely to visit. A lot of people don't visit it when they visit Perugia because perhaps they don't know what it is, and you have to pay for an entrance. But it's really unique because you don't have a lot of how do you say? A lot of guild halls that are painted like this, that are preserved. And so yes. So I don't know if you have any questions. So as I remember, if you missed something, you can see it back on YouTube for a few weeks, also the first one or the next one. And yeah, ciao, ciao, hello, everybody. And well, everything is related. I find it very difficult to summarize I really find it difficult because, myself, when I visit something or when I see something new, you know, for example, if I would now see the Collegio del Cambio for the first time, I would then research every single person that is represented there and then go into the astronomy. It never ends. As I recently said to somebody asked me to tell the history, a short history of Rome. And so, well, you have to go back to the Big Bang in reality. So in the end, you end up at the Big Bang. That's where everything starts, and then you can go from there. So everything is related. So, okay. So please explain a difference between Well, painting is so the difference between painting, mural, and fresco. Painting is just a general word. Everything that is painted, I think, is a painting. Then a mural is a painting specifically on a wall. And it can be painted in different techniques. You can just take a paintbrush and start to paint on a dry wall. That's a mural. The fresco is more specific. The fresco is a more specific technique. So a fresco is a painting, but on the fresh plaster. So it's painted a fresco, comes from the Italian, on the fresh plaster, on the wet plaster. So that is one specific technique. And so a fresco can also be a mural, but not every mural is a fresco. Does anyone still paint frescoes today? Yes. Yes. So of course the commissions are, are perhaps different. But and it's a big job, of course. A fresco. So for example, if you have a big wall and you want it painted in fresco, it's not in a single day, because you always need to do little bits with the fresh plaster. If you make a mistake, you have to take it off all again. It can't be too cold, not too warm, not too dry, not too wet. So it's quite a technique. But yes, I know churches where there are modern frescoes. Yes. Oh yes. I will put the link for YouTube again. So if you it's this one, but you also have the World Virtual Tourist channel on YouTube, where you can see other tours, walking tours, other free academy. For example, here, like this. So here you have the two channels, and excuse me. So most of the murals that they paint today are not frescoes. No, because they paint with today, with today's paint, you can paint on dry walls, and it can stay. But most of the murals that they make today, also the ones that do it with these spray things, it's not fresco. No. Painting in fresco, outside is quite tricky, because it has to dry. So it has to dry in a regular way. It can't be, as I said, the sun it's very bad if the sun shines on it while it's drying, for example, or while you're painting. So it's not ideal for outside. But I can't be wrong with the English, though. A mural today is probably a synonym of street art outside, I think. So wall painting would be perhaps more a general word. Okay, so Am I sometimes doing actual tours in Perugia? Yes. So, I mean, virtual tours, yes, and in-person tours, yes. Yeah, that's a big part of my job. And yes, cows. Yes, I know what you refer to. Yes, there are people who are much better in summarizing than me. You know, I always end up at the big bang. So somehow, yeah. Okay, so I'm guiding in person in Umbria. So I'm a licensed guide in the whole of Umbria, and you know, also in Tuscany. But for me, Tuscany, it's much further away. So, okay. What was the advantage of painting fresco? Seems to be a more difficult technique. Well, a more difficult technique than dry painting, yes. But if you paint a fresco, so in inside a building, if you paint a fresco with good materials and you paint it with the good techniques and you do it everything, you know, according to the book, you know, it's almost eternal, you could say. The enemy of frescoes are, of course, humidity, cracks in the walls, for example. But if it's painted in a good way, it's you know, as you can see, they're still there. And if you just paint dry on a wall, that is you know, that doesn't last very long. And yes, and well, you can't cover all, you know, big walls or large portions of walls with panel painting. I mean, so how to get in touch with me for doing a tour? Well, here I will put my email address. This is the email where you can always contact me for tours. So I don't know if the questions otherwise. Well, already I thank you for joining me. And yeah, I hope to see you next week when we will talk about, yeah, some more heavy stuff, you know, the last judgment, you know, Luca Signorelli. So the frescoes we're going to see, for example, Sigmund Freud, he saw those frescoes and then he couldn't sleep anymore. So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. And hope you enjoyed it. And then I hope to see you again soon. So bye, everybody.